Hello students, my name is Maria Verisa Sequeira, Assistant Professor at Rosary College of Commerce and Arts, Naveli. This particular presentation is for the Bachelor of Arts second year students in the subject Social Psychology. The title of the unit is Evaluating the Social World. The module name, Persuasion, Models, Determinants, Peripheral Cues and Resistance. Outline. In this particular module, we are going to understand the concept of persuasion. We will understand the different routes of persuasion. We will learn the different peripheral cues and we'll understand the different ways to resist persuasion. Learning outcomes. To examine the concept of persuasion, to examine the different models of persuasion, to learn about the different peripheral cues, as well as to examine the different ways to resist persuasion. Let us now begin. Persuasion. What is persuasion? Persuasion refers to an attitude change via an external message. How do people think about and incorporate information they receive that is counter to their current point of view? What determines whether they are persuaded by arguments or not? Dual process models of persuasion. It is the dual approach that has proved most successful in explaining how, when, and why people are or not persuaded by others. Two models characterize this approach: the elaboration likelihood model and the heuristic systematic model. Although slightly different in emphasis, both argue that there are two ways that a persuasive message can cause an attitude change, each differing in the amount of cognitive effort or elaboration they require. They are the central route and the peripheral route. The central route is taken when people are motivated and are able to think carefully about the content of a message. Here, people are influenced by the strength and the quality of the arguments. In contrast, the peripheral route is taken when people are unwilling or unable to analyze the message content. Here, people pay attention to cues that are irrelevant to the content or quality of the communication, such as the attractiveness of the communicator or the amount of information presented. It is important to note that the attitudes can change via both routes, but the resulting attitudes may be qualitatively different as a result. Attitudes formed by the peripheral route do not require comprehension of the message, are weaker, less resistant to counter-argument, and are less predictive of behavior than the central route. Processing route determinants. There are a number of factors that specifically affect which route might be taken when people process persuasive messages. Here we outline 5 of them. They are speed of speech, mood, involvement, individual differences, and humor. Rapid speech makes it hard to process the content of the persuasive message, so people abandon the central route in favor of the peripheral route. Mood can also have an impact on which route is taken. In general, happy people use the peripheral route while unhappy people tend to use the central route. The explanation for this is that negative moods can signal that something is wrong, which triggers an increase in attention to identify the problem. The implication is that happy people are therefore more susceptible to weak cues like source attractiveness. The extent to which the issue is important to the self has an impact on which route is taken. If the outcome of the argument or the issue at hand directly affects has an important implication for the self, then it is more likely that the perceiver will pay more attention and take the central route. There are also individual differences that make people more likely than others to take one route over the other. Need for cognition is the degree to which someone is oriented to engaging in effortful thought. People who are in a higher need for cognition are therefore more likely to take the central route, while people who are in lower need for cognition are more likely to take the peripheral route. Similar effects have been found using related tendencies such as the need for closure, and the need to evaluate. Differences in self-monitoring can also have an impact. This is the degree to which someone is concerned with what other people think of them. People who are higher in self-monitoring will be more likely to take the central route, while people who are lower in self-monitoring will be more likely to take the peripheral route. Finally, the use of humor can influence which route is taken. Relevant humor leads to the central route taken, while irrelevant humor leads to the peripheral route being taken. Next, we go on to studying about peripheral cues. Once a route is taken, it may prove persuasive or not, depending upon the characteristics of the context. If the central route is taken, the key determinant of persuasion will be the argument quality. If the peripheral route is taken, then several characteristics of the message source will be critical. First, peripheral processing is more likely to lead to an attitude change if the source has physical attractiveness. Chaikin, for instance, found that experimenters trying to persuade undergraduates to sign a petition to stop universities serving meat were more successful if they were attractive than if they were unattractive. Second, similarity to the self is an important determinant of attraction. Similarity in terms of shared attitudes, appearance, or social categories can all enhance the persuasiveness of the message. Finally, source credibility is a key peripheral cue that increases the likelihood of attitude change. A source is perceived credible if they are seen to be an expert, unbiased, and trustworthy. Next, we go on to studying about resisting persuasion attempts. That is, how can we resist another person's attempt to persuade us? The first one is reactance, protecting our personal freedom. Now there's a question. Have you ever experienced someone increasingly mount pressure on you to change your attitude on some issue? As they do, you may experience a growing level of annoyance and resentment. Not only do you resist, but you may actually lean over backwards to adopt views that are opposite to those that the would persuader wants you to adopt. Such behavior is an example of what psychologists call as reactance. That is, a negative reaction to efforts by others to reduce our freedom by getting us to do what they want us to believe or do what they want. Research indicates that in such situations, we often change our attitudes and behavior in the opposite direction of what we are being urged to believe or do. This effect is known as negative attitude change. The next one is forewarning, that is, prior knowledge of the persuasive intent. When we watch television, we fully expect there to be commercials, and we know full well that these messages are designed to persuade us to purchase various products. Similarly, we know that when we listen to a political speech, the person delivering it is attempting to persuade us to vote for him or her. Does the fact that we know in advance about the possibilities of intent behind such messages help us to resist them? Research on the effects of such advanced knowledge, known as forewarning, indicate that it certainly does. When we know that a speech, tape message, or written appeal is designed to alter our views, we are often less likely to be affected by it than when we do not possess such knowledge. Forewarning provides us with more opportunities to formulate counter-arguments, those that refute the message and that can lessen the message's impact. In addition, forewarning provides us with more time in which to recall relevant facts and information that may provide useful in refuting a persuasive message. Those who want to persuade others and want to counter the effects of forewarning should try distracting the individuals between the time of the warning and the receipt of the message. This tactic can prevent participants from counter-arguing. In fact, those who have been forewarned when distracted are no more likely to resist the message than those who are not forewarned about the upcoming persuasive appeal. Wood and Quinn found that forewarning was generally effective at increasing resistance. Next, selective avoidance of persuasion attempts. Still another way in which we resist attempts at persuasion is through selective avoidance. That is, a tendency to direct attention away from information that challenges our existing attitudes. Selective avoidance is one of the ways in which schemes guide the processing of social information, and attitudes often operate as schemas. Television viewing provides a clear illustration of selective avoidance. People do not simply sit in front of the television passively observing whatever the media decides to dish out. Instead, they channel surf, mute the commercials, tape their favorite programs, or simply cognitively tune out when confronted with information contrary to their views. Next, actively defending our attitudes, counter-arguing against the competition. Ignoring or screening out information incongruent with our current views is certainly one way of resisting persuasion. But growing evidence suggests that in addition to this kind of passive defense of our attitude, we also use a more active strategy. That is, we actively counter-argue against views that are contrary to our own. Doing so makes the opposing views more memorable than they would otherwise, but reduces the impact on our attitudes. Igni and her colleagues exposed students previously identified as for or against abortion to persuasive messages delivered by a female communicator. The messages were either consistent with the participants' attitudes or were contrary to these views. After hearing the message, the participants reported their attitudes towards abortion, indicated how sure they were the use, and listed all the arguments in the message that they could recall. In addition, the list of the thoughts they had by listening to the message. Why? Because this provided the information on the extent to which the counter argued internally against a message when it was contrary to their own views. The results indicated that the counter-attitudinal message and a pro-attitudinal message were equally memorable. However, participants reported thinking more systematically about the counter-attitudinal message and reported having more oppositional thoughts about it, a clear sign that they were indeed counter-arguing against this message. Next, inoculation against bad ideas. More than 40 years ago, William Maguire suggested that people could be inoculated against persuasion if they were first presented with views that opposed their own, along with arguments that refuted these attitudinal positions. He reasoned that when people were presented with counter-arguments against the opposing views, they would be stimulated to generate additional counter-arguments of their own. And to test this prediction, he conducted several studies with which individuals received attitude statements along with one or two sets of arguments. One set of arguments support the statement, that is the supportive defense condition, and the other set of arguments refuted the statement, that is the refutational defense. 2 days later, participants received additional messages that attacked the original statements with new arguments. Finally, participants were asked to report their attitudes towards these views. As it is, it predicted the refutational defense was more effective in preventing persuasion. In other words, exposure to arguments opposed to our attitudes can serve to strengthen the views we already hold, making us more resistant to subsequent efforts to change them. For more information, please refer to the book Social Psychology by Baron Ethel. Thank you.